Well, Peter Darton won't rush into a decision on whether to support Labor's new version of the Stage 3 tax cuts. He wants to let Albanese suffer for longer in the wake of his broken promise to the electorate. Darton took his time coming to a position on The Voice, and now he's going to do the same thing on these tax cuts.
I wasn't planning on making an announcement this week in any case, so we've got a lot of work that we've done just to look at the forward estimates numbers, the medium term and into the out years as well.
But the Albanese government is trying to turn the tables on the opposition, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the coalition should get out of the way on the tax relief package.
Unfortunately, we got a bit of a glimpse of the Liberals and Nationals in the documentary that was aired on the ABC last night. The Liberals and Nationals are still led by a divisive leader, and they are still a divided coalition.
And so there you go, the political game heats up for 2024. Let's bring in now the Fin Review's Deputy Editor, Kyla Lusukian. So good to see you. And the Chief Economic Advisor at Judo Bank, Warren Hogan. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Warren, I want to start with you. I mean, we're all talking on Sky News and political commentators about the broken promise, Albanese's breach of trust with the electorate. But a lot of economists are saying that the fact that the government's changed Stage 3 tax cuts, this is also now a missed opportunity for tax reform. What do you think about that?
Well, it's reversing reform, because the Stage 3 tax cuts were really the reform element of the overall three-stage package put forward in 2019. So it's actually going backwards on a reform agenda for short-term economic and political objectives, really.
I mean, one of the attractive parts about the Stage 3 tax cuts, Kyla, was that it created this synthesised 30% tax bracket across company tax and personal income tax. People didn't, have to shuffle their money and their taxes. It's a much easier system. That's now lost.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I guess what some of the commentators who we were talking to were saying that, people might look for tax minimisation methods, that type of thing, that weren't going to do that, they weren't going to need to do that, and now they might be doing that. But I mean, I think overall, you'd say that a lot of the Fin's readers would probably think that, we need philosophically to do this type of thing to actually, stop the bracket creep, and this was a way of doing it. I mean, you remember we were both reporting on politics at the time when Turnbull brought this in,
yeah.
And it was part of a package. It was like Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and so this was. It wasn't kind of like this thing that was done kind of in and of itself. It was done as part of this thing. So I think it would have been good to get to the end of that process. Perhaps if Labor had some views about what tax should look like, what tax policy should look like, they could have perhaps, enunciated it, taken to an election, for instance, that type of thing. But, they said they were going to do this and it was part of a package. I think they should have done it.
Yeah. I mean, bracket creep is something we've been speaking about a lot in this show. Tax increases by stealth. Australia has a disproportionately high reliance on direct taxes, on personal income taxes, compared to other countries with a AAA credit rating. And Middle Australia shares the burden of this. The last time there was changes to the tax thresholds was 2008. Really, if that had... if the changes had been aligned, the top tax bracket would be kicking in for those earning $250,000 right now, not $190,000 or $180,000.
Yeah, and indeed, if we went to be in line with some other countries around the world, it would be maybe $350,000 or something like that. Of course, that would have implications for other income levels. But to your point, bracket creep is out of control in this country in the last 2 years. It's a silent tax, and in a low inflation world of the last 30 years, the general public and the politicians have managed it. But it is stark how much it's increased. To give you an idea, income tax paid by households in the 3 months to September last year was $91 billion. In 2 years prior, in 2021, in that same 3-month period, it was $65 billion. It's gone up. It's massive.
Massive.
So bracket creep's always there.
That's why Labor's budget position as well is in such good shape.
Yeah, and look, this is never discussed, but the real issue is the other side of the ledger. Do we need to reduce the size of government, because we're rapidly getting our government back to the size it was in the 1970s, and that was not a great decade for the economy. So we're not actually dealing with the real issue, which is is the size of government right? And of course, tax cuts are an important way to help start to reduce it, but we have to reduce our reliance on income taxes.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it.
I mean, Kyle, at this point, it just seems like tax reform is in the too hard basket. Even if Peter Darton does, and he'll probably have to support these tax cuts. He can't go to an election arguing that vulnerable Australians don't deserve more tax relief, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, it's very hard to make that point, and particularly these tax cuts will help. I think the number was 11 million people, and they will disadvantage, relatively speaking, 1.3 million people who would have got more tax. So it's going to be a very hard position for him to argue against that. But yeah, like I said earlier, I think what it does is put back this kind of cohesive kind of tax policy making, and instead it's kind of, we'll just do this because maybe there's a by-election on, or there's some other ad hoc issue that we need to address right now before we get to like what tax policy should look like.
Short-term politics.
That's right.
Instead of actual proper tax reform. Now, let's have a look at the retail sales. They took a steep dive in December as shoppers cut back on household goods, clothes and footwear. This is even in the run-up to Christmas. It shows how much the cost of living crisis was biting. Warren, this is said to be the steepest decline since the pandemic.
Yeah, we've got to be careful because of the shift in consumer spending towards the Black Friday, Cyber Monday. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, which adjusts for different seasons and different events each month, is struggling to deal with that. So we had a big jump in November, which was revised down. Then we've got this fall now. Then what's going to happen in January? So we've got to look through this. So just a word of warning on the data there. But this is to be expected. Rates have gone up a lot. Consumer spending was relatively strong in the pandemic, and the consumer is bearing the brunt of not just higher rates, higher income tax burden, and obviously the cost of living. So I actually think this is going to get worse before it gets better, and there shouldn't be any surprises here. It's not collapsing at 2.7% a month. That was just the monthly figure, but we are in a declining trend for spending, and that's going to put pressure on many retailers.
Yeah, and look, the point is that the high immigration, the 500,000 people a year, is definitely holding up the economy, whereas a lot of economists point out, and I'll come back to you on this, Warren, but Kyle, a lot of economists point out that we are in a per capita recession, and that's why it feels so tough for people. That's reflected in the retail figures. Yeah,
I mean, there's no doubt that there's a cost of living crunch on for quite a lot of Australia. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I guess it's what, and what the impact of that is on businesses, on retailers. I mean, I don't think this is directly correlated, but obviously you saw Godfrey's, fall into a hole. There's going to be company reporting season coming up starting next week. So I think we will have an opportunity now to see what spending and consumer sentiment is doing for businesses and for their profits. Inflation data meant to be out tomorrow. Both of you, economic experts, any predictions on what we're going to see?
Look, the group of economists out there are usually pretty good, so I think we're going to see a moderate increase. It's still high, 0.8% in the quarter, but the annual rate will come down to around 4.25%, 4.5%. So it's all going to move in the right direction, but the devil is in the detail. And we've got to look at the domestic services inflation. None of that was in the monthly, not a lot of it's in the monthly indicator, which we had for October and November. So we will get more insight into the trajectory of domestic inflation. And that, of course, is what the RBA is looking at. It isn't coming down anywhere near as quickly as the overall inflation. And of course, I don't think this inflation battle is won just yet. We may not need more rate hikes, but I think tomorrow will be a bit of a wake-up call that rate cuts are a long way off.
Quickly, what's your view on why our inflation levels are falling more slowly than other places in the world, the US, UK?
Yeah, well, we're lagging those countries, so that's just a matter of timing. But also, our industrial relations system is rigid, and it was slow for wages to start picking up. They've only just started to, and every business I talk to says it's wage and non-wage, i.e. industrial relations related, costs that are really keeping on pushing up. But what worries me is that business costs are not abating, and that's going to make it hard for inflation to fall significantly or to the extent the RBA wants over the course of this year.
Yeah. Also, Kyla, quickly before we go, tell us about Qantas's new corporate affairs chief who they've poached.
Well, I think Qantas is in the middle of an almighty repair job, so they need someone...
Thanks to you guys at the Fin Review.
I mean, I'd say thanks to Qantas's service record.
Of course, I'm just joking.
So they've got a new person in to do the kind of the corporate spin, and they've also got McKinsey in to tell them how to make the planes run on time. So hopefully, good luck to them.
Yeah, all right. Kyla Lasuki and Warren Hogan, thank you both so much.
Thanks.